Hi, my name is Michael Awada, and my project is on the Philippines and the climate change in the Philippines. I'll be continuing with an introduction. I'll be speaking about the Philippines from an ecological standpoint, political standpoint, social standpoint, an economic standpoint, and from their cultural standpoint. To give some background about the Philippines, it has an extremely diverse population that speaks over 80 different languages that spreads over 7,000 plus islands in the Western Pacific. In 1986, after 2 decades of autocratic rule, democracy was restored in the Philippines. While agricultural production is a significant facet of the Philippines economy, manufacturing of products such as electronics, apparel, and household goods have been growing rapidly. The climate change in the Philippines boasts both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Some opportunities include more tourism revenue because of the warmer weather, water conservation, and greater agricultural yield for farmers. Some vulnerabilities include rising sea levels, floods drowning agricultural resources, land conversion, long-term deforestation. From an ecological standpoint, some general information about the Philippines. The population is just over 100 million people, with 50% of that population living in urban areas. For water resources, rivers included 12.5% dead out of the 88 rivers surveyed. Coral reefs were only 5% in excellent condition. From an ecological standpoint, the land in the Philippines contains 6% solid waste recycled in the metro areas. From the forest standpoint, foreign mining applications account for 27.5%. Declining forest cover attributes to negative 2.4% a year from 1990 till 2000. From a political standpoint, the Philippines is actually very similar to the United States. Their legislature contains an upper house and a lower house, one containing the Senate and one containing the House of Representatives. From an executive standpoint, the executive power is vested into the president, and from a judiciary standpoint, the Supreme Court accounts over all the other lower courts in the Philippines. More from a political point of view, two major parties in the Philippines are the Liberal Party and the United Nationalist Alliance. From a social perspective, the population is just over 100 million people as of 2014. Population growth rate is 1.81% since 2014 as well. Urban population is 44.5% of the total population in the Philippines. The rate of urbanization, 1.3% at an annual rate. More from a social perspective, sanitation facility access is only accessible to 74.3% of the population in the Philippines. Major infectious disease risk is very high. Types of Philippines diseases include bacterial diarrhea, hepatitis A, typhoid fever, and malaria. The Philippines economy is actually pretty well set, sitting at number 76 in the world. Their GDP is worth 456.4 billion with a 7.2% growth. Inflation in the country is 2.9% with an employment rate of 7.3%. Culture in the Philippines is very important. The family is the center of the social structure and includes the nuclear family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins. People get strength and stability from their family as many children have several grandparents. Concern for the extended family is seen in the patronage provided by family members when they ask to seek employment. Before industrialization, there was a lack of manufacturing in the Philippines. The country was mainly dependent on fishing and farming. There was no railways, very little growth opportunities, and they were dependent on domestic demand for growth. After industrialization, Spain and Britain opened up large seaports in the Philippines. Engineers developed railways, telecars, and telegraph system, and was mainly used by European countries as a transition port to other parts of Asia. Many citizens began moving out of the rural areas into the outer parts of the country to work. Currently, the Philippines is also the second largest producer of geothermal power in the world. They also produce hydropower through large dams, however, these dams are a highly controversial topic in the country. Modern economy GDP includes $456.4 billion, unemployment rate is 7.3%, and inflation is 2.9%. The fossil fuel burning history of the Philippines uses coal to mainly power the country along with other natural gases. Fossil fuel burning continues due to a lack of renewable energy systems which are very ineffective. Importing oil, coal, and gas for many years while burning these are the main reason for fossil fuels and for the impact on the environment. More from deforestation and urbanization. Urbanization very slow to begin in the Philippines in comparison to many other countries. Urbanization was increasingly concentrated in the metropolitan areas, especially near Manila. During this time, much of the population migrated outward after England and Spain developed seaports on the coastlines. Forests have been getting cleared ever since Spain and England left the Philippines during the Industrial Revolution. More deforestation. Beginning in the 1500s, after Spain and England came to this country, and then during the Industrial Revolution, deforestation of 20.9 million acres of Philippine forests released 3.7 tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Philippines was once one of the largest tropical wood exporters and now is an importer of them. Life in the Philippines is pretty tough. Many children are working manual labor jobs with no formal education. There is a huge deficiency as a country when it comes to the poor and their lack of an education system. Politics in the Philippines, as you could imagine, are corrupt, and politicians are only favorable toward the wealthy and the urban areas they are from. Rural areas in the Philippines are neglected by most politicians and the government. More about the Philippines' lifestyles. Manila has the largest poor population in the world as a city. Poor population in the Philippines are disproportionately employed in agriculture, fishing, and forestry mainly. 62% of these families make up the lowest three income deciles in the Philippines. Farmers and fishermen can make a lot more money outside of Manila based on the laws set forth by the country. The other dominant group is the wealthy in the Philippines. Given very little evidence of a middle class, the wealthy make up for the highest incomes in the Philippines. Here you can see a few charts for the Philippines, one for consumption and another for Philippines energy mix in 2011. As you can see on the right in the pie chart, the oil takes up 31% of the energy used, including close followers with geothermal energy at 22% and coal, which is imported at 20%. Population vulnerabilities in the Philippines is high. The Philippines ranks number 3 on the most vulnerable list of countries due to climate change in the world. The vulnerable population is mainly the poor and homeless in the Philippines, and the climate change mainly affects them with landslides, floods, and typhoons. With a population of 92 million and growing 1.2% by the year, you can see why this would be a problem. Migration to the urban areas has caused overcrowded cities, waste and housing problems, pollution, and a threat of watersheds to most of the population. More from population vulnerabilities. The female population is actually very vulnerable in the Philippines, considering they account for 70% of the crop production. Climate change affects their crops every year, and being a part of the poor population, there's not much they can do to get that money back when their crops wither. As for indigenous people, they have the same problem as females do. Trying to live off the land in the Philippines is difficult, with the rate of deforestation being very high, and droughts withering crops, along with mudslides, less food forcing more and more people to the urban areas. The climate change making more difficult to live off the land in the Philippines. Environmental degradation is really big in the Philippines, and it's very important and at high risk. Encroachment of upland forests and watersheds leading to the denunciation of consequently significant reduction of carbon sinks. The population growth not only is increasing the vulnerability of the country, but also majorly increasing emissions. A rapidly growing population led to a greater use of the country's agricultural, forestry, and marine resources, causing an increased pressure on the natural environment in the Philippines. Trade-offs for the country include switching to more renewable energy sources and less fossil fuel imports. The country will eventually have to choose to become more green and efficient, or will have to deal with the natural disasters that come with high emissions. However, to complete any of this, you need a good government, transparency, and accountability. Companies are not going to like having to go more green in a country where corruption is large and the politicians don't care. More trade-offs needed for the Philippines include clearly defined policy objectives that have wide public support and flexible yet stable promotion mechanisms. Decision-making that reflects transparency, accountability, coordination, cooperation, and multi-stakeholder participation by the government. Enabling the industry structures with adequate infrastructure and technology could help save the Philippines from higher emissions and in turn saving them from more natural disasters. The Philippines is part of the UNFCCC and part of the Kyoto Protocol. The UNFCCC is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it was adopted in 1992 as the main vehicle to combat global climate change. The Kyoto Protocol is an agreement between most nations of the world which settles international binding emission reduction targets and was agreed on in 1997. The Philippines signed this ratification on 4/15/1998. The Philippines' first involvement in the UNFCCC was in the Kyoto Protocol when it was adopted in Japan in 1997 and is still in effect until today. The Philippines signed the ratification on 4/15/1998. They joined the non-Annex B Party for Not Developed Countries, officially entered the UNFCCC on October 31st, 1994. The Philippines was one of the 165 countries to sign this protocol because of major concerns over climate change and dangerously rising emissions in their country and in the rest of the world. The Philippines is majorly involved in the UNFCCC. 5 of their major involvements include this past session, the 20th session, which was held in Lima, Peru in the UNFCCC. They were a major participator and spoke their minds about what should happen. Philippines also majorly was involved in this event critical to make progress on international climate change agreement which will be held in Paris in France in 2015. The Philippines dialogue mainly stated in Lima to avoid real man-made catastrophe, to continue momentum into the Paris meetings, and that the Philippine typhoons that they had already endured had already validated what science has long warned them. Another major involvement for the Philippines is participating in CDM. CDM is a resource and energy development program provided for emissions reduction projects, which generates certified emission reduction units for developing countries that may be traded in emissions trading schemes. What this means is, this allows developed countries to buy CERs and to invest emission reduction where it is cheapest globally. What this program is intended to do is to assist parties not included in Annex 1 in achieving sustainable development and to assist parties included in Annex 1 to achieve their compliance emission limitation and reduction commitments the cheap way. Rather than buying it, they can just trade for it and meet their global emission target. Another major involvement for the Philippines is the RED Plus program. This is to assist eligible reduced emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, pretty much to save the rainforest in the country. Testing ways to sustain livelihoods of local communities and to conserve biodiversity. The Philippines RED Plus program strategy presents a broad range of strategies corresponding activities over a 10-year horizon from 2010 to 2020. A strong research community and national capacity to engage with forestry projects, relatively decentralized natural resources, management capable of instituting local level RED Plus projects to stop deforestation, lower emissions, and save the rainforest for the Philippines. Another one of the Philippines' major involvements was in their own country, and that came with the Filipino government implementing the Act R.A. 9729. RA 9729 in regular people terms was to systematically integrate concepts of climate change policy formulation of all government agencies and units. This called for the Philippines itself to create the CCC, the Climate Change Commission. The Climate Change Commission's primary goal is to formulate the national framework strategy on the climate change, to serve as a basis in formulating and developing programs for deforestation and climate control. The last major implementation that the Philippines contributed was the joint implementation. Defined in Article 6 of the Kyoto Protocol, allows the country with emission reduction or limitation in Annex B, which the Philippines is in, to earn emission reduction units and trade them to the more developed countries. It is implemented to give certain countries under Annex B a cost-efficient way to fulfill their commitments. My recommendation for the country of the Philippines would be to continue to evaluate, assess, and contribute to the climate change situation in their country, along with all the other countries that are included in the UNFCCC. It should use its resources it has from advanced countries to reduce emissions by continuing to use the RED Plus program, the GI program, and CDM projects. In turn, the rainforests in the Philippines will see a huge reduction in deforestation, and emissions should fall depending on how accurate and how productive these programs are. Also, the Philippines should also take a major initiative to have crisis management plan in case of a natural disaster caused by climate change, such as a flood, landslides, or tsunamis. This would help protect the country itself and its citizens with disaster relief. To continue progressing, having talks with the UNFCCC and calling for stronger emissions targets for more advanced countries in these meetings will help the Philippines also with climate change. Also, the Philippines should keep using the Kyoto Protocol as their way to influence and set standard in emissions and targets and to set standards for the more advanced countries who should be following in suit of them. One of my solutions would be reducing deforestation. The cost-benefit analysis for this would include the cost of continuing the RED Plus program, which would not take a major toll on the Filipino government because the program is already in place, as you already know. However, it would cost in the billions to keep companies from not benefiting from the rainforest in the Philippines, including those who are poachers. Also, for the solution, implement programs and laws to disallow such acts on the rainforest. The benefits of this could include continuing to use the RED program with lower emissions by greenhouse gases caused by the deforestation. Citizens like women and indigenous tribes living off the land would benefit ecologically and financially, saving the rest of the mostly destructed rainforest in the Philippines for future generations to come. Another cost-benefit analysis and suggestion for a solution I would have for the Philippines is going green and using alternative energy. The solution, again a rough estimate, but after research, billions of dollars would have to be dedicated to make such a massive partial switch throughout the whole country to using alternative energy, if not trillions. It would lower imports, possibly affecting exports due to less buying of oil and coal from other countries. The benefits, however, it will keep the country in line to meet their target emissions. It would lower the use of fossil fuels and oil for producing energy. It would lower energy costs for the citizens of the Philippines due to the use of alternative energy. It would also reap the benefit of a greener country, which means a brighter outlook for the future generations. Implications for these future generations would be based off my plan and few solutions I had for the Philippines. Future generations would diligently need to follow up and continue to innovate in a way to keep emissions and energy down. Future generations would also have to be a greener country in terms of waste management, recycling, and alternative energy, as opposed to burning fossil fuels and using deforestation as a weapon against themselves. Women and farmers and indigenous peoples will benefit from all the programs mentioned. These programs and solutions I proposed are meant to keep the country's natural resources intact and would continue to allow people to live off the land for many years to come. The theory of justice for the Philippines I suggest is that the Philippines need to acknowledge that by spending more money on alternative energy and technology, that in turn it will benefit from the future generations to come. To realize that the natural resources are limited things, and that more use of them will eventually mean higher prices, more destruction of their lessening rainforest, and higher emissions leading to more natural disasters and to the destruction of their country. Thank you, and that will be the end of my presentation.